Lazar. I'm John Zanis, and we are still talking about, for the most part, the Cardinals game. We'll start to look ahead to next week's opponent later on in the week. Evan, who do you have lined up for that?
Mark Schofield's coming on again this week. We missed him last week because of the holiday, so just carrying it over.
Okay, so we'll look forward, as the Patriots have their double LA dip coming up here. But first off, again, we're putting a bow on the Chargers, and Tuesday is always that day where Evan gets to really look at film and see what's going on here. And Evan, I think one of my microphones, my mic is unplugged here, so I'm going to put it back in. You got me a little flat. We're gonna look at the film, and obviously the number one thing that people are talking about is Cam Newton, and it's still that thing. And again, it's you have the game, and you're worried about, okay, hey, Patriots won. Let's take the good from it. But it's really hard to find silver linings in this game. I know we can talk about the defense. And certainly there were good things to be found in the Patriots defensive performance here. But again, the focus is just, it's so Cam centric. And I think it ought to be at this point, because it's a question not only for now. And again, a lot of people wrote columns, and not just hot takers here in the sports media or on the sports talk radio, but you get a lot of professional, Bedard, Curran writing columns like maybe let's not do this Cam Newton thing anymore. Your thoughts on that? First off, on whether or not the Patriots should keep, and it's we don't know what they think of Stidham or what they have in Stidham, but whether they keep trotting him out there with performances like he had on Sunday.
Well, it's definitely difficult to sell that, if he's going to play like he did on Sunday, then it's definitely a difficult sell. But I think the biggest thing that you see with Cam is that he seems to me like a guy that can get in quicksand. And for people that have seen the movie The Replacements, one of my favorites, at the end of the movie, they do this whole soliloquy about how when you get into quicksand and you have one mistake go wrong and then another and then another and then another, and it starts to just pile up on you. And I feel like in these games when Cam plays poorly, it's often an early mistake or a couple of errant throws early in the game. He has the interception in this game. Then he misses a couple of throws. He missed Demir Bird along the sideline on a little stop route. He missed, Demir later on in that same opening quarter on a crosser against the blitz where he tried to throw hot to him. Those types of plays kind of then snowball into bigger problems for him down the road, where all of a sudden he goes early on in the game. He looks comfortable. He looks like Cam. He makes some poor plays in the first quarter, and then the wheels just fall off, and he's just kind of a mess the rest of the game. So I actually thought early on, I studied a lot of those throws really closely that he missed, and I said, hey, is it mechanical? Is it his feet? Is it, his shoulders? Really, with throwing mechanics and with accuracy, you're always looking front foot, front hip, front shoulder. Those are the three kind of, checkpoints that you want to have. You want your foot pointed towards the target. You want that front hip to stay closed until you start rising up to throw the football, and then you want it all to kind of open up at the same time so you can get that torque and really get through the throw. And for the most part, early on, his throwing motion was pretty solid. His feet were okay. And then as the game wore on, his feet were a disaster. His throwing motion was off. His mechanics were off, and the ball was just flying all over the place. The one thing I will say in defense of him is that this accuracy game, this poor of ball placement, is definitely an outlier from what we've seen from Cam the rest of the year. He's actually been pretty steadily, he's had some bad games, he's had some good games, but he's been pretty steady on that kind of even line of accuracy. If you look at some of the advanced metrics, this game, he completely kind of cratered, and this was a probably his worst in terms of ball placement, downfield accuracy. This was his worst performance of the year, even worse than some of those games right after he returned from COVID.
Which is crazy, because you've seen those were really bad games and pretty much sunk the season. That little COVID stretch between missing time and then what followed really was the dagger in this season right now, and is probably going to be why they are not going to be able to compete for a playoff spot unless something miraculous happens. But in addition to the mechanics, how about the choices? Because we have seen at times either not even looking to the right, not looking at anybody going down the seam, not looking at his tight ends at all. And again, we know the tight end play hasn't really been exceptional on its own. Not hitting guys when they do flash open, even by a little bit, waiting a little bit too long on things. That's also been a problem. How much of that did you see?
That was, I think, the second biggest problem that I saw. If he had hit some of the open throws that he did attempt, then we probably wouldn't be seeing such a bad stat line for him. But the secondary problems, I think, are with timing and with just sort of understanding anticipation, throwing guys open, throwing guys the ball as they're breaking out of their routes and not necessarily after they've already broken out. So, you have that play, for instance, I put one on Twitter where he's throwing a crossing pattern to Jacoby Myers, and Myers gets the separation. He wins on the over route. The post safety is too far back to be a factor in the play. And Cam just, for some reason, doesn't pull the trigger. There was one a little bit later on in the game with Damiere Byrd in the end zone where if he had just thrown it maybe a half a second or half a beat earlier and it kind of just lofted it up and put it on Damiere Byrd, then they might have actually scored on that play. But the ball just came out too late and it sails out of the back of the end zone. Timing is such an important aspect of accuracy. We talk so much about mechanics, and sometimes I think we get caught up in the minutia of mechanics because some weeks, I thought this week Cam's mechanics declined as the game went on, but there were times in this game where I felt like he threw with the same throwing mechanics that we saw in Houston, and he threw for over 300 yards in Houston. So it obviously wasn't a major problem for him against the Texans. This week it was, and sometimes decision-making, timing, those types of things are just as important as his feet or his hips or his shoulders or whatever the case may be, that we sort of nitpick at some of these mechanical things. And I think ultimately what you're seeing with Cam is a guy that really is playing well when everything goes well for him early, and then it can really snowball on him from there when things start to go poorly.
Yeah. So again, this is one performance, but on the whole, it is interesting that the last couple of games he actually has played fairly well. From what you would expect for Cam Newton. And now Bill Belichick again, in the Zoom calls with the media these past, and what we've heard from him in the past couple of days, Evan. It still seems like he's sticking with Cam. It wasn't as definitive as he had been in the past. I guess maybe leaving the door a crack open. Now I wonder again, what I think the easy thing to default to is to assume it's Bill Belichick. He's here to win. He still thinks Cam gives him the biggest chance to win. That's his assessment of the situation. There's nothing any deeper than that. I guess the layers you want to peel off of this thing that other fans are looking for is what's to be gained by winning. And again, we can argue culture. The locker room might really like Cam. But I think there are other factors at play here that people aren't looking into. Yes, I think Cam gives him the best chance to win. I do believe he has the locker room, and I don't believe Stidham does. Just from what we know, it seems like
I think that's a big part of it.
He's got those guys, and you pull him right now, I think that's going to sit poorly, not only from a culture perspective that you might actually be waving a white towel this season, but also they really like him. And I think that has to be factored in. The third thing I always wonder is, because of that low ball contract offer, how much guilt there is from Bill thinking like, I could have paid this guy. I had money. We brought him in on a low ball deal. There's money there. I never gave him that kind of like feel good bump. And now he's just kind of playing for peanuts. I'm a job away too. I know that it's worth it. I mean, it's almost bad business. So I think there's a lot of things at play. I don't know which one it is. Ultimately, I think if you're slicing it into a pie, it's probably the first thing we mentioned the most, which is I'm here, I'm watching. Cam gives us the best chance to win. That's who I'm playing. But I do think that other stuff is in play.
Yeah, I think the second thing that you said about him having the team, and I think we saw that at the end of the game when Isaiah Simmons laid him out, that the entire team on the sideline rallied to Cam's defense, and David Andrews was ready to take on the world.
And a huge part of their post-game commentary, too. A lot of people, that fired us up and this and that, and he's our leader. So you got a guy who threw for 84 yards and was clearly part of the problem, not solution in this game. And they're lauding his toughness and his leadership and talking about him like a hero off of that. That says a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these younger guys too. Now, Andrews doesn't really fit in this category, but to a guy like a Jacoby Myers or Demir Bird or even N'Keal Harry, Cam Newton is a hero to them. He's a hero, maybe even more so than Tom Brady was a hero to them. And the fact that he comes from a similar background to them, they can relate more to him. He's a guy that people didn't always believe in terms of they knew he could run, they knew he could throw the deep ball, but was he going to be a consistent NFL quarterback and all that type of stuff? And I think when you watch Cam play this week against the Cardinals, I really do feel like, and to some degree, that was kind of an anomaly. That was an outlier. And all the stats back that up. His accuracy was not anywhere near as poor, even in some bad games.
Right.
The Broncos game.
This was as bad as it gets.
Yeah, this was as bad as he has gotten all year long. And I don't know. I think that there's also another argument or another sort of part of this discussion about consistency. And we're so used to watching Tom Brady march out there every single week, and even a bad Brady game is still a pretty good game by most people's standards in his prime, right? Or even towards the end of his career. And we feel like this bar for consistent play at the quarterback position is here when it's really here. And if you watch a lot of quarterbacks play in the league, you're going to see week to week guys look good, then guys don't look good. And that's just position.
It's amazing because this shouldn't be a surprise. Every single person who's a Patriots fan and everyone in this chat right now, you play fantasy football.
Right.
You watched David Carr light up the Kansas City Chiefs 2 weeks ago and then go out and turn the ball over 3 times and not score an offensive touchdown against a miserable Falcons pass defense this week. And I'm sure plenty of you started him as a streamer. So you have to know that this is the ups and downs of normal NFL life. It's just the Patriots, we haven't been in this pedestrian position where you've had to worry about by far the most important position on the field. You can have games when you have Tom Brady, you can have games where the blocking's not great or defense doesn't, but you still have Tom Brady and it makes up for a lot. And again, whether the current version of Tom Brady with this offense would have been an improvement over Cam, we've already had that conversation. We're not even sure that that's necessarily the case. But again, you take for granted what you've had all of this time. So again, the question is, do you see what would it take at this point for them to pull the plug on Cam? Because again, what is happening as well is if Cam is giving you the best chance to win, like it or not, it is knocking you further down that draft board and taking you out of play if you have your sights set on a non-Lawrence quarterback. You got to get somewhere into that top 10 to get a top 3 quarterback in this draft, and it's easier to do so. They entered the game in the 12 spot. Now they're you keep moving down. That's harder to do from the 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 spots. So the further you push your way down, the more you can probably wave bye-bye to the chances of jumping up and getting a franchise quarterback. And it is amazing. It's not something you would think that they would do, but I saw a stat the other day, Evan, about the amount of teams that have reached the Super Bowl without a homegrown quarterback are very few over the course of the last 25 years. So it is super, super important to get your guy, have him be your guy from start to finish. And that's something that that's going to happen at some point. They're going to have to rip off that Band-Aid and take the plunge.
Right. And I think a big part of that homegrown quarterback conversation is getting a good quarterback on a rookie contract or an affordable contract where, you can pay the rest of the roster and build out the rest of the roster the way that you want to. The Chiefs are a great example. Yes, they're paying Patrick Mahomes starting next year on that big 10-year extension. But in their Super Bowl year, he was on a rookie deal and he was on a cheap contract. And that allowed them to go out and give extensions to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and sign a Sammy Watkins and sign a Tyrann Mathieu and go out on and build their roster through veteran free agency and trades. And that's the flexibility that you get. So there's nothing more valuable in this league, no matter when you get the quarterback, whether it's in the top 10 or the 3rd round. There's nothing more valuable than a good quarterback on a rookie contract. That's the home run. Even a quarterback that's just kind of serviceable, like a Jared Goff on a rookie contract, is extremely valuable to a team like the Rams, because they can go out and they can get Marcus Peters, they can get Aqib Talib, they can sign Aaron Donald to extensions, and they can get those pieces around them. They can trade for Brandon Cooks. How did the Rams do all those things? Is because Goff was cheap, and they were able to do that. So that's a very valuable thing to have. And the Patriots having Cam Newton on the cheap, whether it's this year or next year, could also be similarly valuable. But I think the thing that it comes back to with Cam is that ultimately we're looking for Cam Newton to be a type of guy that he just simply is not. If you want him to be proficient in the short passing game, get the ball out on time, keep the offense on schedule every single week, and be this consistent, down to down player, you got the wrong guy. This is a type of guy that really thrives, in my opinion, throwing the football down the field in rhythm. And if you can get him those intermediate and deep shots like they did against Houston, honestly, and like they did against the Jets at times, then he can hit those. And maybe he only hits 4 out of 10, but if you're hitting 4 20-yard plays out of 10, then all of a sudden the stats look a lot better and the production looks a lot better on the offensive side of the ball. So that's the difference between a quarterback like Brady or Breeze or Manning or these kind of just efficient monsters. These guys that go out there and complete 70% of their passes every single week and are just boom, 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 and right through their progressions, balls out on time when they hit the back foot. That's a different style of quarterback. Cam's the type of quarterback that needs to let things develop a little bit, throw from the pocket still, but attack down the field.
And it's an underrated skill set that I think everybody is obsessed with: arm talent and the ability to make these zip throws across the field, across your body, deep downfield. And I mean, it is an extremely underrated quarterback skill to be able to hit guys on these short passes in stride where they can get their yak. And again, that's something Cam's not doing either.
Something that we argued with Tom Brady, all the Brady haters that said he wasn't the GOAT, and all he did was dink and dunk and throw short passes.
That's not easy.
It's not easy. And
to put them in a position to make plays, to not get them killed, to throw away from the defenders, to hit them at the optimal time before the defenders collapse on them, so they have an ability to make a move in stride. All of that stuff matters. And you see Cam do it a couple times. There's a few plays where it's just a little behind a guy, delivered a second too late, and the play has no chance of going beyond the 2-3 yards
there was a great example, third down play. It was 3rd and long, and they ran sort of a clear out concept for N'Keal Harry, and N'Keal Harry was running a shallow, and they ran the verticals up the field. And I don't know if N'Keal Harry would have ran for the first down. Obviously, we know that's a kind of a hit or miss, junction. But basically, what ended up happening was Cam. A lot of people made a lot to do with Cam pointing N'Keal down the field, saying, "Get down the field, get that." No. Cam missed the throw initially, so the defense was going.
You got to get him right across the middle there, and then he's just got to run,
Right. So he's going. So
by the time he gets to the sideline, the fact that he's short of the sticks is irrelevant. That ball should have been out way before then.
Right. So the right side of the coverage gets cleared out by the 2 vertical routes, and they have all this underneath space for N'Keal Harry to run into with the football. And does he make it? Does he not make it? I don't know, but it's obviously a higher percentage play than what they ended up doing with that down. And if Cam had thrown the ball to him in stride and just let the scheme do its thing, let the scheme work, because there are opportunities even with these limited pass catchers to make more plays than they are currently making, especially against the Cardinals, and just let the scheme work. That's to me more so than the accuracy stuff and the consistency stuff that a lot of people make a lot out of. To me, it's the throws that he either misses or doesn't throw on time, where it hurts the structure. It hurts the scheme of the play. If you can just run the scheme, then even if you don't have a ton of weapons, even if you're not running out there with Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski and Mike Evans and what have you, you can oftentimes make up for that by just executing the play call to where it's supposed to be, getting the ball on time to where it's supposed to go. And I think if they can do that more often than what they did on Sunday, then all that accuracy stuff and the mechanics and his footwork being poor and all these kind of little other things that people want to talk about that don't make him a different type of thrower, I'm telling you, it's gonna go away and you're gonna see much better results.
Cool. So I just want to see the chat's piling up right now. I want to let everybody know. I see Cameron asking whether there'll be a mock draft coming out about Patriots quarterbacks. I trust you. Evan's going to do plenty of those. That's one of the things he's known for. But we are going to take questions, so you can start piling them into the chat at any point in time, and we will get to them probably in the last 10 minutes of the show. We got a few more things we want to hit on before that happens. Just real quick, we'll put a bow on the Cam Newton thing. So again, I'd kind of asked a little bit before, what has to happen for them to pull the plug on him for this year and give Stidham a shot for a few games? What do you think?
So is the question what I think needs to happen or what I need to see to happen? Because I think there are two different answers. What
do you think? I mean, number one, what would it take for Bill to make that move?
Them to be eliminated from the playoffs.
Eliminated.
Yeah, mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. I truly feel from everything that he has said to us time and time again is that Cam Newton gives him the best chance to win football games, and he feels that strongly. I think that Cam is the better quarterback for them in the here and the now in terms of stacking wins together. So I don't think that they're going to pull the plug on Cam and go to Stidham until we're in a situation where they're mathematically eliminated from the playoffs and they just want to look at Stidham, a couple of starts at the end of the year, week 16, 17, that kind of thing, just to get a feel for what they have with Stidham in a game situation. I think it would behoove them if we get to that point to put Stidham in on Monday and have him go through an entire week of practice and in a game as the starting quarterback and not have to go off of, in regular season action at least, mop up duty, trash time in the fourth quarter which
is impossible. Yeah.
Right. So I'm telling you, I don't think that Stidham is going to get any looks until later on in the season when they're mathematically eliminated.
I think week 16 and 17, I think it's very, very late if it happens. And that's what I think as well. And it might just be one game. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at as well. I don't think you'll be seeing it. I think, I wonder, again, another game like this, if performance becomes the reason why. I'll take it back. That's the other reason I see. If all of a sudden Bill's assessment of the situation is Cam is regressing, we're worse here. And then I think he would also consider it. But I don't know what it would take. I would say another game like this, you start to have the conversation for real.
Yeah, I mean, if he throws with that poor, listen, like I've said,
you can't run an offense like this. They were gifted great field position by a couple of kick returns and a turnover here, so they weren't stringing together long drives. This was as bad as you can possibly play. I don't know that they could. I think another one this bad could potentially result in.
Yeah, and I do just want to say that I don't think Jared Stidham's the answer, and I've been strongly on that side of the aisle here, and believing that Stidham I think gets overrated by a lot of people just because, in all honesty, I think it's sort of the Jimmy G effect.
He's the unknown. He's the, right.
I think it's really just this kind of effect, this allure that we got, all the offseason before they signed Cam, we got sold this song and dance from everybody in the organization about how great Stidham was, and people are still holding on to that. He was not good in camp. He struggled in the preseason last year outside of basically a quarter and a half. Really, once we got to that Tennessee game, it wasn't that pretty. Most of the throws that I highlighted of Stidham that were, hey, they might have something here, are from that Detroit game in week 1 of the preseason, right? And really, from that point on, the turnovers, the putting the ball up for grabs, all those types of things really were apparent then and are apparent now.
Not a lot of love for Stidham in the chat. But of course, there's two topics that people like to talk about, and only two topics people like to talk about. It's what's going on with Cam Newton, the quarterback situation, and N'Keal Harry. That's it. Those are literally the only two things anybody cares about anymore. So to answer the Harry questions, he's officially a bust, I think, at this point. And it is what it is. So I don't know what people want him to be, because I don't know if he can be that. I don't know if the Patriots can do anything to unlock him. And I would honestly say, and we talked about this in the postgame show, we're officially at the point where I think he starts losing snaps to Moncrief. He might start losing snaps.
I would play Moncrief over him on Sunday.
He might start losing snaps to Ford. He could be he could just be inactive some games here. And so I don't know where to take this conversation. We haven't taken it a million times already. The one thing I will throw out there, only because I know we've shut this down a little bit, but I was listening. I was working with Greg Bedard on his podcast earlier today and listening in, and Greg said, enough already with Nikhil. Have him bulk up in the offseason, try to switch him to move tight end, see if that works. He cannot play receiver in this league. I know you've said you don't know that the tight end thing would necessarily work here, but if the receiver thing doesn't work, is this a Hail Mary that's worth trying?
I could see it, as a move tight end type. A guy that's mostly detached from the formation is basically what he's doing now. A lot of end splits, a lot of routes in the slot, not necessarily routes, but blocking out of the slot, I should say.
Exactly.
And a lot of that type of stuff. That's basically what they have done a lot with Nikhil in the recent weeks, and he's really become an underneath receiver, and people want them to throw the ball down the field to Nikhil. He can't run down the field. He doesn't create any separation down the field, and basically what you're doing is counting on a 50-50 ball of chucking it down there to him and hoping that he can just go above the defense.
Which they're not doing.
Which they're not going to do. It's just not an efficient play. It's
not a Patriots play. The Patriots don't like plays with it where a chance of a turnover is that high. It's a team that desperately wants to hold on to the ball above all else. They would rather go 3 and out 100 times and turn it over to you. They do not like throwing 50-50 balls. It just isn't. It isn't really in the scheme.
Yeah, and I think the frustrating part for me with Nikhil is that in camp and then also in the regular season early on in the season before he got injured, and this kind of speaks, it's not an excuse, but kind of speaks to the fact of how much injuries have derailed his career basically since he got here in that rookie preseason, and it kind of all started to go downhill when they put him back in that Detroit preseason game. Remember, he got hurt. He was coming into that game banged up a little bit, and they put him back.
And he made a couple of great plays in that game, and it was like, whoa, look, he went up and got it. He just beat guys in coverage in that game. It was actually, that was exciting for a moment. It was actually 50-50 balls. He was covered
against the second and third string cornerbacks on the line.
Sure. But he was still just going up and beating guys for the ball, and you're like, oh, that looks pretty good. And then you're right, Hurt came back in, and that was it.
Right. And that's kind of where it went downhill. So in a lot of ways, again, not an excuse for Nikhil Harry, but in a lot of ways, you got to blame the team for a lot of his failures, I think, in terms of his usage, in terms of how they've treated his injuries, in terms of what they're putting on his plate. I mean, look, everybody wants to make the DK Metcalf comparison. Go actually watch the all-22 of what the Seahawks asked DK Metcalf to do. He runs 35 routes a game. 10 of them are go balls. 10 of them are posts.
They did ask him to do more than usual last night, I will say, Evan.
3 of them are slants. 1 of them's a wide receiver screen. Like, we're talking about basic route tree stuff here. And he's so dominant at those 4 or 5 routes that it just doesn't matter that he doesn't have the full repertoire of the route tree at him and he's not running 6 or 7 different types of stick routes and stuff like that, right? It doesn't matter that he isn't able to do that because he is so big and so explosive that that one time he beats Darius Slay on the post basically decides the whole game on Monday night, last night, because he beats Slay. The post safety comes down, they vacates the middle of the field, and that one time the Eagles let him loose, he catches a 60-yard bomb and they score a touchdown on the next play. That's the type of stuff that DK is doing, and I don't think in any world that Nikhil Harry or DK would be doing that in Nikhil Harry's position here at the Patriots. They'd be asking him to block. They'd be asking him to run different routes from different alignments. They'd be asking him to make post-snap adjustments, site adjustments based off the coverage and route adjustments is so complicated in this Patriots offense at times for people. And that is exactly what would happen with DK Metcalf. So I'm not saying DK Metcalf would have been the same as Nikhil Harry, would have busted out of the league and all that kind of stuff. But I think there is a lot to be said for how the team has let him down with the way that they have developed him, with the way that he's been used. And then when you supplement that with the fact that he has probably the worst set of feet of a starting NFL receiver in the league. It just has no quickness with his feet, no precision with his feet. He doesn't really understand how to use spacing and kind of route releases and breaks at the top of the route to get open. And it's just all around just has been an absolute disaster. Maybe that is what they do with them. They basically turned him into a tight end at this point.
That's what I'm saying. If you're already
he's not putting his hand in the dirt, but he's doing pretty much everything else like he's a move tight end.
And you do wonder, because ultimately I do think if you did get him up to about 240, 245, you've got a chance where you could do that. And he could line up in that.
He's like 220, 225 right now. And that's the part that worries me about this tight end idea, is that he is already so slow that if you put another 15, 20 pounds on his frame, I just can't imagine how slow he's going to be then. So that's
sure, but you have tight ends, and again, who are running, who are successful running, yeah, but you're right. He's not that fast. He's not fast enough to begin with.
That's my concern with him.
But you're asking him, you're hoping in wherever you align him, he's now running those routes against linebackers.
Right. And that's ultimately, it's funny because when they drafted him, his last year at Arizona State, he played as a big slot. And the comparison that his coaches made when I talked to his coaches down there was to Anquan Bolden.
Yeah.
Right. That was the type. A lot of people wanted to call him Dez. A lot of people wanted to call him
Bolden, big muscular slot over the middle of the field.
Yeah, and being able to get those types of matchups, because they even said at Arizona State, and if you watch his tape in college, that beating press man coverage on the outside was an issue for him. Any time that they put him on the boundary and they expected him to just be able to run a route and get open, it really wasn't good in college either. So what did they do? They threw him a lot of screens on the outside. They threw him a lot of passes in the middle of the field, running out of the slot later on in his career there. And they used his size against linebackers and safeties. Now in college, it's a lot different because they play a lot of zone coverage in college. So in college, when you play in the slot, you're only going to go up against linebackers and safeties, right? Because they're playing so much zone that they're not moving. They're not traveling with guys into the slot with cornerbacks. Yeah, exactly. Whereas in the NFL, you put N'Keal Harry in the slot, then they're going to bump a corner inside and cover him with a guy that has some coverage skills. So that's the difference of it in the pro game and the college game, especially in the Pac-12 where N'Keal played, is that everybody plays quarters. It's all quarters in that conference, right? It's quarters coverage, nothing over the top. We're going to play it safe. We have a lot.
You're open all the time,
right? And you're open a lot because of that. So it's tough. It's really it's tough because the role that they had in mind for him, his skill, it just none of it matched up from the jump, and the injuries are certainly have derailed him a lot as well.
All right, let's move on to some questions here. We were talking about it earlier, but one question here, Moncrief, he keeps taxiing back and forth to the practice squad and back. Does he make the full 53 and end up just being a guy who they throw out there every single week?
I think so, because we spoke to Cam McCord, the special teams coordinator, this morning, and I thought what was interesting about what he said was two things. One, he said that Moncrief can run, and he's an explosive guy, and they found that out in practice and on kick returns. We obviously have seen that. Yep. The other thing he said was really good about Moncrief is his ability to run through arm tackles and contact balance and things like that. That, to me, if he can block, if he can throw his weight around, that sounds like what they're doing with N'Keal Harry, but just potentially better. And we saw against Houston that they ran Moncrief on that one little shallow crosser, which is, I feel like I see N'Keal run that 15 times a game now, and he actually took it for 15 yards because he actually made a guy miss and turned the corner and was able to get up the field. So the role that they're playing N'Keal in, if Dante Moncrief can block in the same capacity or at least in the same ballpark as N'Keal, then I think that they actually might have a better player there.
No, I know. And again, people forget, I mean, Moncrief was a 4.4 40 coming out of college. Is a guy who could run, was a field stretcher for Indianapolis. He's been derailed by injuries and bounced around a little bit, but he's big too. I mean, his profile.
Fast. He's what they thought N'Keal was.
What's that?
He was what they thought N'Keal was when they drafted him.
Big, physical, fast. I mean, his profile coming out of college was a very dynamic, receiver who could do a lot of things for you. And I mean, picking him up off the street, I mean, he looks, again, compared to N'Keal.
Other than Demir Bird, he's probably their fastest receiver.
Yeah, he is. So one thing here, again, it's a little early, but Andy wanted to know, free agents this summer, we're not going to go down the full list here, but what group is the biggest need here, Evan, would you say that they need to address?
Yeah, well, I think that my whole thing with the entire approach to the offseason is everybody's going to make it about the quarterbacks, but I don't care who you put in this offense at quarterback. I don't think that the guy's going to produce well if this is what he's working with around him. So
Yep.
I would really love to see them go out and get either, whether it's a wide receiver or a tight end, a name brand guy that has done it in the league before, that's put up 1,000-yard seasons, that's had made some personal accolades. That's a good NFL wide receiver that we can then see, okay, this guy is going to translate into our scheme because we can watch him play against these 5 teams and run these 10 routes, and we can understand that he is going to work here, and not a Mohamed Sanu who's over the hill or someone like that. Talking about a prime, actual viable pass catcher, because whether it's Cam Newton or it's Mac Jones, or it's Zach Wilson, or it's Trevor Lawrence, I don't care who you put under center. If he's throwing to Ryan Izzo at the tight end position next year, and Damiere Byrd and Jacoby Myers are his 2 top wide receivers, they're going to be in the same boat that they've been in 2019 and in 2020.
We're talking Allen Robinson, we're talking Kenny Golladay, and again, it's not
really the guy I would love to see them get, because he's that inside-outside guy. He's also a little bit younger than a guy like Allen Robinson. This will just be his second NFL contract, so I think he's probably like 26, 27. Golladay.
You like Golladay?
Yeah, because he's a guy, I like Allen Robinson a ton, but this is now going to be his 3rd NFL contract. He's pushing 30. I would like to see Golladay as a guy who's going to get paid a ton. He's going to get paid $18 million a year, but he's someone that is in his prime or going into his prime right now.
You've got the money, Evan. You can't take it with you.
Right.
This is something we've brought up here, but Cameron P here on Twitter heard you guys talking about coaches elevating our players poorly. Been frustrated with that before. You've mentioned this about development as much as talent evaluation. Talent evaluation is one thing, but then player development is another. And it's something we're wondering, what's going on here? How can you have this many swings and misses at the skill position, when it comes to bringing players in here?
Well, I think there's really 2 things, and a lot of it is mental, but a lot of it is also just the taxing kind of part of the mental on the physical, right? And I think what we're looking at is that the Patriots are bringing these guys in. They have a ton to learn in the scheme. You have to learn, when you learn the Patriots offense, you can't just study your routes in the playbook. You have to learn the entire concept, the entire route concept, because if you don't, and you adjust your route based off of a sight adjustment post snap, and the other guy adjusts his route based off a sight adjustment post snap, you're running into each other, right? And that's what ends up happening if you don't understand what the guy next to you is going to do, or what the guy on the other side of the formation is going to do. So there's a lot of learning involved in the Patriots offense. And I think that sometimes they get caught up in, especially during the season, and Bill Belichick says this a lot of the time, that there's not time to drill stuff like footwork and mechanics and the basics of the position when you're in week 12. When you're in week 12, it's all about the Los Angeles Chargers, right? It's all about what we're going to do in this week. What's the install? What's the game plan? What's your role in the game plan? And it's not about footwork. It's not about route running. It's not about all that kind of stuff. And I think that sometimes these younger players, they get too far away from the things that they need to work on in their own games, and they get really caught up in the fact that they have to learn a game plan, they have to learn the offense, they have to learn the opponent, they have to study film, they got meetings all day long after practice, and it's just a different ball game. And I think that that's something that the Patriots are going to have to be able to figure out, is how can they still develop guys physically and mentally and get ready for a football game on Sunday. Other teams have obviously been able to do it better than they have, so maybe they can take from the Steelers page or something like that.
It has to be frustrating where every time you look up, some teams got it, 4 guys throwing, 4 guys running 4 340s, and just, a team like the Steelers that literally just like pukes up, receivers every single year, and to have this situation here. And I get why people are looking at some other teams and wondering, what's going on here.
I misspoke on Allen Robinson, by the way. He's
older. He's younger.
He's also 27. He feels like he's been in the league for 10 years, but it hasn't been that long.
Yeah. Another question here. What's the story with Sony Michel? Speaking of a weapon that hasn't fully developed, activated, and that's it. So it's very clear they want Damian Harris to be the lead guy. Sony Michel doesn't do things differently than Harris. I just think he does them a little worse. And so there's a redundancy there where even with Rex Burkhead out, I don't really know what Sony's role here is going to be. Your thoughts?
So Sony's an insurance policy at this point. He's the guy that he's on the roster at this point, and obviously they're not going to cut him. But
would he be if he weren't a first-round pick?
I don't know. He's on the team right now to back up Damian Harris. And I think that's really all it boils down to. They play the same exact role. They play the same exact position. They do a lot of things the same. Damian Harris, like you said, is just better, more explosive, better contact balance, better elusiveness, maybe even a little bit better vision at times, I would say. So Sony, what's the point of playing him? I really don't know. He's not any means one of their best 2-3 backs. Obviously Burkhead's out now, so I still think that he's worse than James White and Damian Harris. So different roles obviously than James White, and where do you really find playing time for him? And I think Sony, it's funny though, because we talk about N'Keal Harry is going to be at least trending towards a bust, and then when you compare him to Sony Michel.
Sony had success. So he won a Super Bowl with Sony.
Maybe we can kind of, bury the hatchet with Sony here a little bit and say, okay, maybe he wasn't quite as much of a bust as we really thought. Was he a star? Absolutely not.
But they got something out of him.
Yeah, they certainly got more out of him than they've gotten out of N'Keal.
Right. Yeah. I've seen this a couple times come up, but I've seen Matt Stafford's name jump in here as a potential quarterback. What would it take to get that to happen?
Well, I think the biggest thing when you look at things like Matthew Stafford, I actually think Matthew Stafford has been a pretty solid quarterback for most of his career. But now we're talking about paying a guy $30 million a year, right? And just looking at his contract, he has an out this year if the Lions want to get out of his deal. But we're talking about a guy that's going to, whether he gets out of that deal or comes here or what the case may be, you're paying him, right? You're not going to get Matthew Stafford on a Cam Newton type of contract. So the question really is do they want to invest that type of money in the quarterback position? They were hesitant to do it with Tom Brady, even before Tom Brady got old. Even young Tom Brady they didn't always get that top dollar contract from New England. So I think that they look at
only one time in his life was he a top of market quarterback.
Right. So I look at guys like Stafford or Matt Ryan as guys that might be available for the right price. But at the same time, I don't know if you actually want to pay that price if you're the Patriots.
Yeah. And that is exactly it. With you go out and trade for an established veteran like that, you run into those issues we talked about at roster building. Again, the key here is you draft the guy who's your guy and you roll the dice. It's just whether or not they have a chance of doing that. Other question here is any chance they get a good quarterback picking in the middle of the first round where it looks like they're destined to end up?
Yeah, there are some good college quarterbacks that could probably go in that range. A guy like a Zach Wilson, I think, is probably going to be a teens type of pick. I don't anticipate him being a top 10 guy unless he really goes off here down the stretch in the college football season. But I think the main thing that I keep on coming back to, and I know that all draft season it's going to annoy me because we're going to only talk about quarterbacks. They need to build a roster around the quarterback. They have a lot of holes on this team, and I think that really the best course of action to me is to look for an upgrade to Jared Stidham. Let Cam stay for another year as that bridge guy to the next guy. I'm not saying overpay Cam, but just pay him something reasonable to be that bridge guy for another year.
I don't think there's a Cam market out there, so they get him back for whatever they want.
Right, and then get a guy in here behind Cam that's better than Stidham as your kind of future developmental guy.
You get your Jimmy G.
Right, because to me, if you draft a quarterback in the first round and you say, you're the Bears and you say, we're all in on Trubisky. We're going to put all our eggs in that basket. Well, what can you do around him? I think that's a really big question mark. So I would go best player available, whether it's a quarterback, a wide receiver, a tight end, Kyle Pitts, defensive player. There's going to be a couple of good guys that I think are going to fall because those quarterbacks are getting propped up this year. Maybe that's where they end up going with that pick. And you end up getting yourself, kind of like a blue chip stud at another position, and you continue to build the roster around the guy. I come back to the same thing. Last year in 2019, Tom Brady couldn't win with this offense. This year in 2020, Cam Newton can't win with this offense. Stop looking at the quarterback. It's about the pieces around him. It's about the situation around him. It hasn't been good enough for the Patriots in the last 2 years. Really, in the last 3 years. They got lucky in 2018.
They did. And again, it's just watching these games right now, whether it's the quarterback or the receivers who are out there, there is zero respect from opposing defenses that the Patriots are going to be able to.
I know. It's crazy. The Cardinals, I counted about 4 or 5 plays in the fourth quarter where they had all 11 guys
within 10 yards.
10 yards of the line of scrimmage. And their safety is played so low the entire game. Yeah. And that's the point.
Now you can't get the run game going. Again, this is where they're stuck, is everyone just thinks, Evan, just run the ball. That's your strength. You can't. I mean, Harris is getting eaten alive. There's nothing there because the safeties and the D-backs, they're just right up on the line. They're just coming down and they're just filling a hole. There's nothing there.
Yeah, and it was actually, they did run the ball a few times. Harris did break off a couple of big runs, and they just did that with absolute dominant blocking. Just our guys, I don't care how many guys you put in the box, we're still going to be able to run the ball a little bit. And at the end of the day, you're right. Those safeties are playing so low. They got 8 guys already in the box with the safety walking up to the line of scrimmage. There's no place to run the football. And to me, the way to answer that is not N'Keal Harry down the field. You got to throw to Demir down the field. If you're going to have any chance to try to break that dam and break that trend, it's going to be.
Or maybe it's Moncrief.
Or maybe it's Moncrief, right? It's going to be running some of your faster guys.
Have to do it. Yeah. Can't keep doing what they're doing now. Again, just shallow crossers is being basically the only thing that they're getting any sort of traction off of in this offense right now. So last question we'll ask here, because you almost forget that they exist, but it's a total lost year for Keene and Asiasi. Asiasi is eligible to come off the IR. What do we think? You think there's a chance that he gets activated and sees the field in a way that we actually might see what he can do? And we've talked about this before. Even when he was playing, they weren't throwing to him. There were some reports that he was having a lot of drop issues in practices, and they just didn't feel confident throwing to him. It would be nice to see something here. It would make you feel a lot better about next year if you thought there's something in the till.
Yeah, because it's also one of those things too, where if they feel like Asiasi and King can give them anything in the future, then a guy like a Kyle Pitts in the first round probably doesn't make any sense.
You don't need it.
Right. So you really need to find out what you
have to figure out what you need. Exactly.
Yeah. Right. And I think the biggest thing with Asiasi is that Ryan Izzo is a complete zero in the passing game. And if they can it's no disrespect to Ryan Izzo, but
they're Larry Izzo.
They're asking a 7th round pick to be their
number 1 tight end,
play 90% of the snaps. It's crazy. And I really think that the guy that drafted in the 3rd round should be the guy that should get some of this run. Ryan Izzo's actually developed into a pretty solid blocker, but if they don't start throwing out there more guys that are actually, Doug Hyde and Nesson wrote about this, they're running personnel packages out there where only 2 or 3 guys are really viable pass catchers. You got Demir Bird, you got Jacoby Myers, and maybe the running back, right? James White or Rex Burkhead.
Everyone else is just a body.
The other 2 guys, they don't even need to cover.
Harry and Izzo.
It's like Harry and Izzo, or it's Izzo and Jakob Johnson, and it's like those guys are zeros. They're not a threat whatsoever in the passing game. So that's the difference between maybe Asiasi doing some things and spelling Izzo a little bit. Izzo's still going to play on 1st and 2nd down because they're going to want to run the football, and he's still going to play in short yardage situations as a blocking tight end, but they need to get something out of that position. It's been way too long now that they have gone 2 years without getting any type of production whatsoever from their tight ends.
Okay. Last one. I got one more because I like it. What you think the Browns would ever consider moving on from Baker Mayfield? Because we know Belichick loved him.
No, and Josh McDaniels loved him too.
Loved.
Yeah. So there was a lot of chatter before the draft that if Baker didn't go number 1, the Patriots were going to try to make a move up the draft.
Yeah,
to get Baker Mayfield. I think the biggest thing is that the Browns are going to make the playoffs, or at least going to be competitive in the playoffs. They have a decent record this year, and they're not going to be in a position themselves to replace Baker with anybody. Now, if they were the Jets or the Giants and they had a chance at Trevor Lawrence, and maybe they could make that swap, then maybe we could talk about this. A low first is definitely not going to get it done. You're talking about multiple firsts for a guy like Baker Mayfield, and Mayfield does not suck. I don't know how you can watch Cam Newton play every single week and then sit here and say that guys like Baker suck.
Well, he's had back-to-back weeks where he's made 2 of the worst throws to the most open receivers I've ever seen in my life. So he's got some serious issues there too.
I think the biggest thing that you saw out of that Baker and that Oklahoma offense was just how well Lincoln Riley made the offense comfortable for him. And I don't know if the Browns have necessarily done that to the best of their ability, but I would love to have Baker here. I just don't see why the Cleveland would move on.
Okay, so that's it. We've done enough damage, I believe, but we do have another Patriots Beat podcast coming up later this week. We'll let everybody at home know, as always, to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can get all of these videos, our daily Patriots videos. Evan's going to be down at Gillette Stadium again tomorrow for practice, and we'll have updates on the team and what's going on ahead of this week's matchup. When are they heading to LA?
They're heading to LA on Saturday, and then they're there for the rest of the week. Although Belichick was like kind of coy about that this morning.
I'm not sure if they're staying or not, so we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I trust Jim McBride's reporting. I'm not trying to say that he's wrong, but Belichick this morning would not exactly confirm that they were staying out there. So we'll see. Yeah.
So again, the double LA dip here. We'll preview this weekend's matchup again.
Juicy matchup. Patriots against the Chargers. Josh McDaniels this morning sounded like a kid in a candy shop talking about the Chargers defense, because he just like knows this defense like the back of his hand. He knows it so well, and it's so freaking funny to listen to him talk about. They play the same defense every single week. They're going to sit in cover 3 zone. They play this front. It's just basically all guys against your guys.
Also, just any chance you get to scheme it up against Anthony Lynn, it's just you're almost curious how the
coaching staff loves this matchup. They're like, we should run circles around these guys schematically, at least.
Exactly, and there's such a huge advantage. But again, we'll preview that matchup coming up later the week. Again, for Evan Lazar, I'm John Zanis. Thank you for joining us. As always, please, like I said, subscribe to the channel. You will get alerted when we go live and for situations like this, all of our Patriots post game, and you'll get all of Evan's breakdown videos, which go on the channel daily. So